Elizabeth Halbert, and this video is part of my senior project. You see, I've set out on a quest to answer the question, how will the Uncanny Valley impact the future of three-dimensional animation?
Now, most of you are probably wondering, what is the Uncanny Valley? Maybe some of you are imagining a valley without any cans.
Well, that's not what it is. You see,
it all starts in 1970 with a Japanese roboticist named Masahiro Mori. He realized that as robots, or anything, looks more like a human, it becomes more likable. But if it's too much like a human without being perfect, it takes a steep drop into creepiness.
And when the robot or thing moves, that gets even worse. Just like a corpse isn't as creepy as a zombie.
Now, this can be a huge problem for three-dimensional animation, especially when animated characters are meant to fit seamlessly into live-action film. They have to be perfect, because otherwise they're terrible.
So my question is, can the Uncanny Valley be crossed? And once it is, what new problems can arise? To start out, it would be good to know what causes the Uncanny Valley. But to be honest, no one knows for sure. In his essay on the Uncanny Valley, Mori suggests that it helps people tell a living, healthy person from someone who's sick or dead. So maybe it evolved for our protection, from disease and even cannibalism.
Macaque monkeys seem to have an uncanny valley too. In a study by Professor Asif Ghazanfar at Princeton University, they spent more time looking at photos and cartoons of other monkeys than almost realistic computer-generated ones.
The other theory is that the Uncanny Valley happens because human brains like to clearly categorize everything we see.
Professor Susan Broadhurst at Brunel University explains in her book Digital Practices how much of visual perception is based on comparing what we see to things we already know. And she writes that a large area of the brain is dedicated to decoding faces.
So maybe the Uncanny Valley is just our brains getting confused. So what can animators do to avoid the Uncanny Valley? The answer is simple. Either stay at the first peak or cross it completely. But which way is better? Let's look at it like this.
In 1970, Masahiro Mori suggested staying at the first peak of the graph, where things are human but not too human. If you get any closer, it's a slippery slope to spooky, and climbing to the second peak is difficult. I'll talk more about that later.
Plus, the first peak is actually not a bad option. For one thing, simpler faces are more relatable to viewers. Cartoonist Scott McCloud explains it like this.
When you look at a photo or realistic drawing of a face, you see it as the face of another. But when you enter the world of the cartoon, you see yourself.
For another thing, you can animate cartoony characters in much more creative ways.
Just look at these clips of Goofy. You just can't make realistic humans move like that.
Please don't. Anyway, even if not all animation is as, well, goofy as Goofy, sometimes you can still dial back the realism and find a good balance.
3D animation studios like Pixar and DreamWorks do it all the time. Their characters look enough like humans to be likable, but not enough to be creepy. And the 2009 movie Avatar worked around the Uncanny Valley in a different but similar way. The characters were as realistic as possible, but there was no way they could be mistaken for humans.
So we can agree that only sort of realistic is a good way to make three-dimensional animation. But what if you want to make characters to fit into live-action film? Well, all you need to do is spend a year tweaking skin pores. Pretty much.
For movies like Rogue One, A Star Wars Story, and Blade Runner 2049, the process is something like this. 1. Since the animation in both movies was intended to bring back old characters, stand-in actors and animators had to become experts on the original actor's performance. 2. The stand-in actors acted out the scenes, using special cameras that were rigged to their heads and points on their faces for tracking motion. 3, the stand-in actors' heads were replaced with 3D models. For Peter Cushing's likeness in Rogue One, animators used a plaster cast of his face from a previous production as reference. For Sean Young's likeness in Blade Runner 2049, they took photos of her head from many different angles and then built her 3D head from the skull outward. 4. Lots and lots of tweaking. Everything from eyelash positions to the actors' movements had to be perfect. Most people I've talked to have agreed that Grand Moff Tarkin and Princess Leia from Rogue One weren't quite out of the valley. On the other hand, Rachel's head from Blade Runner 2049 was pretty much perfect. It took 10 months for the animators at MPC, the company that made it, to get quite right.
So what does that mean for the future of animation? Well,
there's this idea that computer animation means in a few years the film industry will just be maybe one animator pressing a button on a computer and waiting for it to generate a movie. I'm exaggerating a bit, but I don't think that'll ever happen.
Making convincing three-dimensional animation is hard work for the actors, sometimes using extra actors as stand-ins, months of work from technicians, incredible attention to detail. Even though it's made using a computer, it takes a huge amount of human performance and art. Not to say that there aren't any problems with using computer-generated versions of actors in film.
First of all, replacing actors' real appearances with computer-generated ones could be a way to idealize them even more than Hollywood already does. One critic, Nate Jones, points out that male actors who were de-aged with 3D animation in recent movies tended to be shown in both their current and younger forms, while female actors were only shown de-aged. Plus, the female characters were played by stand-ins, whereas male actors got to play themselves.
One exception, Grand Moff Tarkin was animated using a stand-in actor because the original Peter Cushing had passed away. And that brings up another problem. Is it all right to use someone's likeness in a film, even if they're not around to agree to it?
Actually, this isn't a new question. Back in 1999, Fred Astaire's widow, Robin Astaire, sued the company Best Corporation for using clips of her late husband in videotapes without her permission. She didn't win, but afterwards, California passed the Astaire Celebrity Image Protection Act. It was meant to protect the rights of actors and their estates, but because filmmakers complained, it still ended up giving anyone the right to use a dead actor in artistic works.
So basically, the makers of Rogue One did ask for the permission of Peter Cushing's estate before putting him in Rogue One, but nothing would have stopped them if they hadn't asked.
Cartoons will still be around.
More simplistic animation is fun and relatable, and it has more room for creativity.
Actors and animators will still be around.
Realistic 3D animation will probably get easier as technology improves, but it still takes a lot of effort from a lot of people to put together.
The industry should proceed with caution.
Realistic animation is bringing up problems like idealization and actors' rights in new ways, so filmmakers need to be aware of the consequences it can have. No one really knows what the future holds for three-dimensional animation, but I know that I'm looking forward to it. Thank you.